welcome back to Living My Fest Life, a podcast about festivals, fairs, events, and experiences. Everything from the nationally known to the local and obscure. And today I'm talking about a nationally known event. I'm talking about the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York City.
You can just say New York.
I'm living my best life.
So this week on the podcast, it's going to be a two-parter. The first part, I'm going to tell you the history and folklore of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And then next week's episode, part 2, I'm going to interview friends about their experience walking in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Okay, so the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade staged its first parade in 1924. God, that's so long ago. I must have been a baby. 1924, the year of our Lord. That year, it was called the Macy's Christmas Day Parade, right? And it routed through 154th Street, right past the Macy's store on 34th and Broadway. What? There were three floats, only 3, and they were pulled by horses. What? That sucks for them. To see a fucking horse floating by you. You're in the skyscrapers back then, which were 8 stories tall, and you just see a fucking horse held up by helium floats coming by, screaming Merry Christmas in your face. Is that how things worked? I don't know. Okay, so I was pulled by horses, 4 bands, and zoo animals from the Central Park Zoo were there. Camels, donkeys, not donkeys. They were donkeys. Elephants and goats started the parade. They said that the zoo animals frightened some of the children, is what they said. They were replaced by, flying helium balls of fire.
For the last time, the Excelsior is filled with non-flammable helium.
Right? I think elephants is cool. Camels are really cool. Those are exotic. And of course, the highlight of that parade was Santa Claus. Last in the lineup, in his sleigh. And that tradition still continues to this day. So I'm wondering, if this was the initial Black Friday bridge of like, oh, it's Thanksgiving? Okay, end of the day, let's just start prepping for Christmas. Let's just go ahead and do that. Parts of the classic film Miracle on 34th Street were shot during the 1946 parade. The crowd had no idea that Santa Claus that year was played by Edmund Gwenn from the film. So the parade really took shape during the 20s, especially the Roaring 20s. That was a time of gaudiness. That was a time of people just really coming out and have a good time all over the place. And basically, Macy's employees would be ones walking in the parade. So the gigantic balloons that we see in the parades today, the ones that were made out of helium that float, those began coming into the parade in 1927, so not long after. And one of the things that is crazy is that, these balloons that were, in the shapes of characters and shapes a lot of the favorite characters that kids love, at the end of the parade, they were released into the air. So, pollution. Thank you. The year after that, they were like, hey, we will give $100 to anybody who returns these balloons. So please send them back to us for $100, which I don't know. In 1920, that seems like a lot. They'll buy a lot of flapper dresses and headbands. So they stopped releasing the balloons after a pilot attempted to capture a balloon and nearly crashed in 1932. And they're like, you know what? We should just probably cut it out with throwing the balloons in the air, pissing a lot of people off. So the parade takes typically 3 hours, and it's held in Manhattan from 9 a.m. to noon Eastern Standard Time on Thanksgiving Day, and has been televised on NBC since 1952. Now, before Macy's Parade was a big success, there was a thing called Ragamuffin Day. I've never heard of this. A typical children's Thanksgiving Day activity that began in the 1870s and ran right up until the 1920s when they started the Thanksgiving Parade. So Ragamuffin Day, cute name for a dog, featured children going around and performing primitive versions of trick-or-treating, basically begging. And they got a lot of backlash against this during the Great Depression, so that's why they kind of phased that out. They're like, hey, let's just replace this with balloons and happiness and not asking for food. Now, throughout the 1930s, the parade continued to grow, and the crowds grew to over 1 million people on the parade route. 1 million people in 1933. That is the whole world back then, I assume. The first Mickey Mouse balloon entered the parade in 1934, and that was, the popular one before that was Felix the Cat. Now Mickey Mouse just kind of like ran him out of town. Now, how popular is this? I know a lot of people come to see the parade in person, but more than 44 million people watch the parade on television annually. The festivities started broadcasting on local radio stations before it would run on TV in the 50s. So they were probably describing things in general the way that I describe things on this podcast when I talk about photos people show me on their phone. Real annoying shit, I bet, for the listeners at home. So I can feel for them. The first telecasts were only an hour long, then expanded to 2 hours, and then it was reduced to 90 minutes. And now it just seems to go on forever. It seems like once you finish your Thanksgiving meal and you put Gramps in front of the television and turn on that parade, you come back 6 hours later and it's still going on, right? Does that happen in anybody else's family? The parade has been broadcast simultaneously in Spanish on Telemundo. Marching bands are a really big part of the performances. They take marching bands from all across the country. I mean, what's a parade without cheerleaders and marching band? Just a fucking bunch of people walking down the street. That's what. I should probably stop cussing. It's Christmas. So, it looks like every year, just like I talked about with Oktoberfest, it looks like they, implemented new security controls, new gates, and secure routes. Another fun fact is the route has changed so many times. It used to be a route that went right down Broadway, but in 2009, the route was moved to 7th Avenue because of the new pedestrian plaza along Broadway. Then it was changed to 6th Avenue in 2011, given that the parade draws as a tourist attraction and that does not go over well with some folks. For this year, the route will start at 77th Street in Central Park West, turns left on 59th Street. I mean, it just sounds like there's a lot of planning that has to go through picking out the correct route and probably mitigating a lot of hazards, keeping the folks there happy too. So it's very interesting to know that they're not traditionalists who don't move with the changing times. They're like, no, we're going to make this work for us. We're not going to do the same thing over and over again if it's not really going to work for everybody else. The parade route used to be 6 miles, was cut down to less than half of that in the 40s. The parade will be held this week, Thursday, November 28th, and it starts at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is held in New York, but you can always watch it live stream on TV. CNN did an article this week about high winds expected to wreak havoc on Macy's parade. And I'm going to be calling my friend right now and telling her, good luck, and I love her, and be careful. NYC's Macy's Thanksgiving Parade balloons might be grounded due to wind. All these news articles are coming up right now. So let's see if it actually happens, but at least you'll get a little bit of history about past parades. So let's go some of these character balloons that we've seen throughout the years. Felix the Cat was probably the first well-known one. They had a cat in 1931 when it started. Then they had Felix the Cat. They were like, let's give this guy a name and a personality and spice it up a little bit. In 1933, they had Gulliver, Gulliver's Travels. And then at 1934, like I talked about, Mickey Mouse. Donald Duck, big one. Uncle Sam. Superman was in the 1940s. A big one was the football player in 1941. Now, remember, they skipped a few years, so 1945, they came back with Bobo the Hobo Clown. That sounds terrible. Terrible. They were like, hey, the war is over. Here's a float of a hobo clown. But they also had a teddy bear, a pumpkin, and an ice cream cone. So those are all very, very happy things. I don't know. Bobo sounds lovely. I shouldn't really be judging a clown like that. Kids like clowns, right? I just think the word hobo with the word Bobo was a little distracting. So baseball players, police officers, gnomes came the next couple years, and then 1948 a fireman, which was just a redesigned version of the police officer. So 1950, the Deshound. I mean, that would probably be my favorite one. There's a spaceman in 1952, a spaceman again in 1954. In 1953, the Gorgeous Gobbler was introduced, whatever the fuck that is. Popeye, Bullwinkle. I mean, it just gets more and more hashtag sponsored as it goes on. It seems like it was stuff they wanted kids to recognize and get really excited about. Like in 65, Underdog, which I think is really cool because they could do that. Is it a bird? Is it a hog? No, it's Underdog or whatever. Kermit the Frog in the late 70s. Weebles, Yogi Bear, Betty Boop in 85. In 87, they had Spider-Man and Ronald Reagan. I hope they had them next to each other, so they were fighting. Big Bird was in 88. I really like that. Pink Panther. Let's see. Rocky and Bullwinkle in 96. Babe the Pig in 98. Now, that was a big movie back then. A lot of the Rugrats characters come to play in the late 90s. Charlie Brown and His Football in 2002. Mr. Monopoly. Dora the Explorer in 05. Gosh, this is just really taking me back. Diary of a Wimpy Kid, don't know why he needs to be in there. Sonic the Hedgehog in 2011, again a little late. A lot of Snoopy characters, a lot of Charlie Brown characters, a lot of Peanuts characters, okay. And then recently, in 2019, SpongeBob SquarePants. Hell yeah. Here's a fun fact. The first person to ever be ballooned was Eddie Cantor. I don't exactly know what that means, but I think they made a balloon out of a man. Not out of a man. Not like they took the man, cut him up, and made a balloon. I'm just saying they made a image of this man in balloon form. I love this. Betty White hosted the 1967 parade, and she looks fabulous. So just a few more fun facts before we end this episode, and you eagerly await part 2 to find out, did the parade happen and what was it like to be on the inside? Now, they also had these things called falloons. These are float balloons, so float-based balloons, and they were introduced in the 1990s. Things like the Grinch, the M&M's Chocolate Factory, things like that they wanted to incorporate onto the floats. Balloonicles, which is balloon and vehicle, which is a self-powered balloon vehicle, came in 2004. Things like ice skating, Aflac Duck, hashtag ad. The Energizer Buddy had one of those, Kool-Aid Man, On top of the floats and the balloons that they're known for, they also have performances. So the Rockettes of the Radio City Music Hall are a classic performance that they always have, and they have had since 1957. As our national cheerleaders in dancing, chosen by the National Cheerleaders Association from various high schools around the country. And still, after all these years, I do like this tradition of the parade always concluding with Santa Claus. Now, I know what you're thinking. Shut up, stupid, and just read us the disaster stories about the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade. I got some for you, okay? Just a few. 1993. A strong gust of wind pushed Sonic the Hedgehog balloon into a lamppost and damaged the lamppost, the balloon, and injured children and off-duty police officers in the process. In 1997, again, high winds pushed the Cat in a Hat balloon into a lamppost, led to someone being in a coma for a month. So that is very dangerous. The Cat in the Hat will not only wreck your house, but will wreck your life. So, in 2005, the M&M balloon collided with a street light in Times Square. Parts of the light fell on 2 sisters who suffered minor injuries. And as a result, new safety rules are introduced, and the M&M balloon was retired. Now, what I didn't know and think was pretty cool, the balloons are huge. So, some are about 5 to 6 stories high. The balloons are actually constructed at the Macy's Parade Studio in New Jersey. They have their own studio to construct these balloons. It can be 60 feet long and 30 feet wide. The Charlie Brown balloon, which is extremely tall at 53 feet long, has a kite. He's flying a kite, and that has an 80-foot train. So these are gigantic balloons. To qualify to be a balloon handler, which they need about 2,000 to 3,000 volunteers, that must weigh at least 120 pounds. So I guess that's an important restriction so you don't float away. There are hundreds of team leaders who are required to attend training, which includes aerodynamics, geometry, physics, safety, leadership, and management. Volunteers practice handling one of the big balloons on a field, and the team leaders will include an overall leader, a pilot, a captain, and 2 drivers. And there's also a police officer assigned to march with each balloon. The biggest balloon requires more than 70 people on one balloon. 70 people. Now, the handlers, they are part of the show. They dress in outfits to coordinate, and a lot of the Macy's employees get to decide what they're going to have as their theme. This is a full-time job. Employees create and care for dozens of parade balloons and floats. Everything from brainstorming to how to get them through the Lincoln Tunnel. Like, they have to really plan out what the design is going to be, what the capabilities are, the mechanisms for having them march, transportation, takedown, safety instructions. This is a whole full-time, lucrative, around-the-clock thinking experience. The Macy's Parade Studio, what they call the place where the magic of Macy's Thanksgiving Parade begins. Basically, it's kind of like a soundstage. You know, they have ladders so they can actually practice to see what these balloons can look like. They have 28 full-time studio employees who create the balloons, care for them, test them. Painters, carpenters, sculptors, welders, engineers. I mean, that's cool to know just how much planning goes into the one event that Macy's has. What does it look like? There are long wooden tables, workers standing and sweeping, everything you would think there would be in a Christmas shop, according to this article on USA Today. Fans can actually watch the balloons get inflated. They're inflated at the staging area at 77th Street and Central Park West near the American Museum of Natural History.
I'm living my best life.
And there you go, folks. This is just a brief history, some fun facts about the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade that you might not have known. Thanks again to Phil for doing the editing for the show. And we're going to be reading some of the emails that have been sent to us in the next couple weeks. So please keep sending those in. We really appreciate it. We want to hear about your festivals. Thank you. Goodbye.